Hi everyone, my name is Cassie and welcome to my channel Bookish 4 Eyes. This is my March 2018 reading wrap-up video. It's slightly late because I was out of town, but better late than never. So let's get right to it. The very first book that I read is called Sirens of Titan by Kurt Vonnegut, and I've been wanting to read this book for a while. It's been sitting on my shelves for a while, so I finally got around to reading it. Basically, this is about a rich man who gets to embark on a journey to Mars, to some other planets along the way, and he's accompanied by a beautiful woman on these journeys, but there's a bit of a trade-off, so there's some dark kind of underlying thing that's happening there that he doesn't realize till much later. As with all of Kurt Vonnegut's books, I feel like he takes a basic idea and just kind of transforms it into something absolutely crazy. And this journey was a pretty interesting ride. There was a lot of stuff happening. It did have a bunch of dark humor in it, some very interesting circumstances, and just a couple of twists and turns. I didn't like this book as much as I liked his other book, Mother Night, but this was still a pretty decent read, and I gave it 4 out of 5 stars. If you haven't read any Kurt Vonnegut, I would recommend you give one of his books a try. They're very unique, they're very interesting, and especially if you enjoy dark humor, they're a very good book to read. The next book that I read is called The Hate You Give. I read this as an ebook from the library, which has been returned already. I give this book 5 out of 5 stars. I've heard so many amazing things about this book, and it honestly lived up to my expectations. I couldn't put the book down. I thought the characters were very interesting. I was just genuinely invested in the entire thing, and I couldn't help but want to know what happened next. So I was very happy with that read. Just as a synopsis, this book is about a girl who lives in kind of a poorer part of town, but she goes to school in a more affluent part of town. Needless to say, she lives in kind of a black community, and she goes to school in a predominantly white school. And one night she goes out to a party and she meets up with one of her friends who's also black, and as they're leaving the party, they get pulled over by police officers who then shoot her friend, and she witnesses it, and that is how this whole story kind of emerges from that. It was just very heartbreaking at times, and it was a difficult book to read, but I think it's a great read and it's very accessible. It's an enjoyable read, and I would recommend it to anyone. And it's a young adult book if you enjoy young adult, and even if you don't enjoy young adult, I think this is a great read. I mean, it just has a very interesting story, and especially now, so definitely check it out. The next book that I read is called The Sun and Her Flowers by Rupi Kaur, and this is her second collection of poetry. I read her first book, Milk and Honey, and I enjoyed that, but this one I liked even better. I felt like I could relate to a lot of the poems a lot more, and there's a lot of interesting topics that she covers in those poems. She talks about self-care, self-love, relationships, breakups, just all sorts of things. And I found that, I don't know if it's because I've been like, this is not my first poetry book now, I've read a couple, so maybe I'm getting more used to it, but I found that I knew what she was talking about and what she meant, and that was really refreshing for me. So I think maybe if you are just new to poetry like I am, this would be a great book to get started with, because it was just beautifully written, and it's just easy to kind of know what happens and just to enjoy. I gave this book 5 out of 5 stars, and it was one of my favorite poetry books, I think, so far. This next book I did a full review of, and I'll put a link down below, and this is called Every Note Played by Lisa Genova. This book is out already, I believe. I think it came out on April 3rd, and this book is about ALS, and the main character in this book is a piano player, and he gets affected by it, so his whole life is derailed, and he's no longer able to play, he's no longer able to care for himself. He has a complicated relationship with his ex-wife, who then becomes his caregiver, and his whole life is just completely changed after his diagnosis with that disease. This is an interesting book. I gave it 3 out of 5 stars. I thought all of the details in relation to the disease and his experience were very well done. I just didn't really enjoy the character development. It felt like the characters were very flat. They didn't have a lot of depth to them, and that tends to be my biggest problem when I read books. So there you have it. The next book that I read is a collection of short stories, and these are dark, kind of creepy short stories, which are always up my alley. This is Her Body and Other Parties. I gave this book 4 out of 5 stars. These stories were very kind of realistic, but they also had kind of a mystical aspect to them, I guess. They were a little bit off, like everything seemed right, but then something was a little bit off, and it was kind of like a fantasy aspect, and I enjoyed these. I liked some more than others. I feel like at the beginning of the book I really liked the stories, and then near the end I didn't really like them as much. I don't know why, but overall it's a great read if you enjoy short stories and you're looking for a unique little collection of stories. This is definitely one to check out, so make sure you give it a go. The next book that I read is called The Wife Between Us. I did a full review of this book, so if you'd like to check that out, I will make sure to put a link down below. This book is about a man who has an ex-wife, and he also has his new woman that he's engaged to, and this is told from the ex-wife's perspective and also the fiance's perspective, and then slowly changes midway through the book. Overall, it was a very easy read for me. I really enjoyed how I didn't have to struggle to get through it. It was just very fluffy, but in a good way, because I don't normally enjoy fluffy books, but this one was definitely the better, fluffier book. And this is good if you maybe enjoy kind of romance and aren't really too keen on reading thrillers, but you would like to maybe dip your toes into one. This would be an easy transition, I think, from the romance focused kind of books onto a more thriller type book. So this might be your gateway drug into that genre as well. I thought it was well written and everything. I just thought it was too surface level. And the book felt very shallow. There was just it just felt like Sex and the City to me, basically, to sum up my other review of this book. But if you're looking for a light thriller, I recommend this book. I ended up giving this book 4 out of 5 stars, which is very generous. So check it out if it sounds like something you'd be interested in. Last but not least, this might be the best book I read in the month of March, and I highly, highly recommend that you check it out. This is called The Immortal Lists by Chloe Benjamin. This book had like all the right things that I enjoy in a book. It had all the right things. This book is about 4 siblings who go to a fortune teller in 1969, and she predicts when they're going to die. And the book is divided into 4 parts, and it's narrated by each of the 4 siblings. They all die at different times, obviously. So it starts out with the first sibling who dies first, and it kind of takes you through his journey from the moment where they met the fortune teller to the moment when he's supposed to die. And throughout each of those sections of the book, where you dive into each character's particular life, you get to know them so well. And I absolutely love that, because I got to know all of these 4 siblings incredibly well. I got to know their side of the story, why they were, how they were. It explained a lot about their relationship within their family, and also just their personal choices and decisions. It was just a beautiful read, and it was just a very interesting perspective on how people act when they know a specific date when you're supposed to die. So in this case, it was just a very interesting perspective on that instance, and I really enjoyed it. And I think this was a very well written book. I basically couldn't put it down. I really enjoyed it, and I highly recommend it. If you're looking for a great read, this is definitely it. So that's it for my March 2018 books. I'm currently reading Red Clocks, this book, and hopefully I'll be able to read it soon enough so I don't have to return it to the library. So there you have it. Please let me know if you read any of these books, and also please let me know what books you're reading right now, if there's any good ones. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you next time.